It is early morning on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. A charcoal fire is burning. Fish are cooking on it. Bread is waiting nearby, and 7 disciples are coming ashore from a boat, dragging a net so full it barely moved when they tried to haul it in, a net that had been empty all night, through all the dark hours of fishing that produced nothing, until a figure on the shore told them to cast it on the right side. They come ashore, and the figure is standing there. He has made breakfast. For them, himself, the risen Christ, the one who holds the keys of death and Hades, the firstborn from the dead, the one whose resurrection changed the nature of the universe, has been on the beach building a fire and cooking fish while his disciples pulled the net in. He says, "Come and have breakfast." Not, "Let me explain to you what happened." Not, "Here is what I need you to understand about the resurrection." Not, "I have something important to say about your failure to stand with me at the cross." Come and have breakfast. The Greek word is ariston, the ordinary morning meal. The most domestic word available, the word for the thing a family does together before the day begins. The most ordinary words the risen Christ speaks, and the most revealing. Before we follow Jesus through every significant meal in the Gospels, from the wedding at Cana to this beach at dawn, I want to plant something in your mind. There is one meal in this list where Jesus does not eat. He is at the table. He is the host. He takes the bread, gives thanks, breaks it, gives it to the people around him. He pours the wine and says, "This is my blood." And then he says something that most readers pass over quickly. "I will not eat it again until it finds fulfillment in the kingdom of God." He is sitting at the table of the Last Supper, the meal he has most eagerly desired to share, and he is already looking past it. He is at the table and not at the table simultaneously, present and absent, here and somewhere ahead of here. We will get to that meal, but not yet, because to understand what he means at the Last Supper, you have to understand every meal before it. This is not a study of Jewish dietary laws or first-century food culture, though we will need both. This is not a theological analysis of the sacraments, though the sacraments emerge from what happens at these tables. This is not a series of inspiring stories about how welcoming Jesus was to people, society excluded. This is a close reading of every significant meal in the Gospels, paying attention to who is at the table, what Jesus does there, what he says there, and what each meal declares about the world he is building. Because here is what becomes visible when you read every meal together. Jesus' table practice is not accidental or incidental. It is one of the most consistent and deliberate aspects of his entire ministry. Every table he sits at becomes, for the duration of that meal, an enactment of the kingdom he is proclaiming. Every choice about who he eats with is a theological statement. Every meal is a sign, not of what is, but of what is coming. And the last meal he cooks, on a beach for the people who ran, is the most complete picture of all. We start at a wedding, with wine that has run out, and a mother who notices before anyone else. The wedding at Cana is the first sign Jesus performs in John's Gospel, and it happens because his mother notices something and tells him about it. There are details here that matter. Jesus and his disciples have been invited to the wedding. They are guests, not hosts. Mary is there, and at some point during the celebration, Mary says to Jesus, "They have no more wine." This is not a crisis for the guests. Running out of wine at a wedding is a crisis for the family hosting it. A significant social embarrassment, the kind that would be remembered and talked about, the kind that could follow a family for years in the small connected world of first-century Galilee. Mary notices it before anyone else has raised the alarm. She goes to her son, and he says, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." In the Greek, it's woman, not mother, not cold, but formal, a slight distancing. And the question "tie mois kai soi," what to me and to you, is a Hebrew idiom that means, what do we have to do with each other in this matter? I'm not the right person for this. This is not my moment. And Mary turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." She does not argue. She does not explain. She does not say, "But the family will be embarrassed. But think of the host. But this is important." She simply repositions the servants in anticipation of his acting, as if the refusal is not the final word, as if she knows something about his no that the servants do not. 6 stone water jars are there, the kind used for Jewish ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus tells the servants to fill them with water. They fill them to the brim. He tells them to draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They take it. The master of the banquet tastes it and calls the bridegroom over and says, Everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. The best wine last, when the ordinary wine is gone and the party should be winding down, when the social fabric of the occasion is about to fray. The best wine arrives. Not in place of the celebration, but in extension of it. Not as a rescue, but as an abundance. John says this was the first of the signs through which Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Here's what most people miss about Cana. The sign is not primarily about Jesus' power to transform water into wine. It is about timing and abundance. The best wine comes last. The celebration that seemed to be ending is actually just beginning. The host of the party did not know where the wine came from. Only the servants knew. The miracle happens in the ordinary vessels of purification, in the background, without announcement, and produces an abundance that exceeds what was there before. Every meal in the Gospels will do something similar. Appear as one thing and turn out to be another. Appear as an ordinary dinner and turn out to be a declaration. Appear as a meal with the wrong people and turn out to be the kingdom. Now watch what happens when Jesus sits down at the table of a tax collector. Levi is sitting at the tax booth when Jesus passes. Jesus says, "Follow me." And Levi gets up, leaves everything, and follows. And then, immediately, as one of his first acts as a follower of Jesus, he throws a great banquet at his house. He invites a large crowd, tax collectors and others, which is the gospel writer's polite way of saying everyone Levi knows professionally and socially. Tax collectors in first century Galilee were not merely financial agents. They were collaborators, Jews who had contracted with the Roman occupation to collect taxes from their own people, keeping everything above the required amount as profit. They were wealthy. They were despised. They were considered ritually unclean by the religious establishment. They handled Gentile coins. They interacted constantly with non-Jews. They were categorically excluded from the community of the righteous. And Jesus reclines at Levi's table, surrounded by them. The Pharisees and their scribes ask his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" It is not a theological debate. It is a social accusation. Eating with someone is an offer of peace and acceptance and identification. The person who eats with tax collectors is declaring in the most public and embodied way available, that these people belong, that they are not excluded from the community of God's people, that the categories the religious establishment has drawn are not the categories Jesus is drawing. Jesus hears the question and answers directly. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. He is not denying the categories. He is saying the categories are the reason he is here. The tax collectors and sinners are the people who most need what he has come to bring. To exclude yourself from the table of the excluded is to exclude yourself from the doctor's work. Levi's banquet is the first fully articulated theology of the table in the Gospels. The table is not for the righteous, it is for the sick. And the doctor has come to eat with them. Now watch what happens when Jesus is invited to a Pharisee's table, and everything that is wrong with the invitation becomes visible in the way the dinner begins. Simon the Pharisee has invited Jesus to dinner. This is significant. Simon is curious about Jesus, possibly even favorable. You do not invite someone you despise to your home. He is watching, evaluating, attending. He has Jesus at his table, and he has failed to offer him the customary hospitality. In the ancient Near Eastern world, the arrival of an honored guest at your home required three things: water for their feet, a greeting kiss of welcome, and oil for their head. These are not optional courtesies. They are the social grammar of hospitality, the embodied declaration that the guest is welcome, honored, safe. To omit any of them is a statement. To omit all three, as Simon has done, is a significant social slight. Jesus notices. He will name it explicitly before the dinner is over. While they are reclining at the table, a woman comes in. Luke describes her as a woman in the city who was a sinner, Solisma hamartolos, a recognized category, a person with a known reputation. She has heard that Jesus is dining at Simon's house. She comes. She brings an alabaster jar of expensive perfume. She stands behind Jesus at his feet, the position of a servant, the position of the lowest person in the room, and she begins to weep. Her tears fall on his feet. She wipes them with her hair. She kisses his feet. She pours the perfume on them. Simon watches this and thinks, Luke gives us his interior monologue, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him and what her reputation is. If he knew, he would not allow it. Jesus says, Simon, I have something to tell you. He tells the parable of the two debtors. One owed 500 denarii, one owed 50. Both had the debt canceled. Which one will love more? Simon says, the one who had the bigger debt canceled. Jesus says, you have judged correctly. And then he turns to the woman. While speaking to Simon, he turns to face her. He directs Simon's attention to her while addressing Simon and says, do you see this woman? The question is devastating in its simplicity. She has been in the room the whole time. Simon has seen her. But Jesus is asking something different. Do you see her? As I see her? As a person rather than a category? He catalogs the hospitality failures. You gave me no water for my feet. She wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss. She has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not anoint my head. She has poured perfume on my feet. And he says, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven, little loves little. And he says to her, directly now to her, your sins are forgiven. The others at the table say, who is this who forgives sins? Jesus says to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. The dinner at Simon's house is a masterclass in the theology of the table. The person who received the invitation failed to honor the guest. The person who crashed the dinner honored the guest completely. The one who was excluded from the religious community is the one who understood what the presence of Jesus required. The host with the right credentials was the one who missed the point. The sinner with the alabaster jar was the one who got it. And now watch what happens when the table moves outdoors. To a remote hillside where there are no tables at all. The feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle recorded in all 4 Gospels, which is John's way of saying, pay attention to this one, it is not peripheral. A large crowd has been following Jesus. They have come to a remote place. Cana is across the Sea of Galilee, up a hillside. It is late. The disciples say to Jesus, send them away so they can go and get food. Jesus says, you give them something to eat. Philip calculates the cost. 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Andrew finds a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. He says, but how far will they go among so many? Jesus says, have the people sit down. And here are the 4 verbs. He takes the loaves. He gives thanks, Eucharistasis. He breaks them. He distributes them to those who are seated. He does the same with the fish. And everyone eats as much as they want, and 12 basketfuls of broken pieces are collected afterward. The crowd, seeing what Jesus has done, say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. And they intend to come and make him king by force. Jesus withdraws to the mountain alone. He feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, the most abundant provision in the most desolate place. And when the crowd responds by wanting to make him king, he refuses and retreats into solitude. The miracle that demonstrates unlimited abundance leads directly to the withdrawal from political power. The table in the wilderness is not the beginning of a movement to seize authority. It is a sign of what authority looks like when it is genuinely present. It feeds, it distributes, it collects the leftovers so nothing is wasted, and it walks away from the crowd's attempt to capture it. Stay with me. 4 meals, or rather, a wedding, a banquet, a dinner, and a hillside with no tables at all. A woman's tears on feet that were not washed by the host. 5 loaves and 2 fish and 12 baskets of leftovers. In every case, the table is doing something more than feeding people. In every case, the table is a declaration. This is what the world looks like when God is at the center of it. This person belongs here. This abundance is possible. This forgiveness is available. This is the kingdom, enacted in the act of eating together. Before we go further, if this kind of close reading is what you come to YouTube for, subscribe to The Ancient Dispatch, Season 2, Episode 4. New episodes every week going deep into the books and lives of Scripture with history, original languages, and the weight that most Bible content doesn't stay with long enough to feel. And tell me in the comments, which meal of Jesus has hit you hardest so far? I read every one. Now, the meals move toward Jerusalem. They become more intimate, more costly, more loaded with weight. And one of them becomes the hinge on which all of Christian history turns. Jesus comes to a village. A woman named Martha opens her home to him. She has a sister named Mary. Martha is serving, preparing the meal, managing the household, doing the work that a meal for an honored guest requires. Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to what he says. This is not a passive act. In the first century Jewish world, sitting at the feet of a rabbi was the posture of discipleship, the posture of a student being taught by a teacher. It was the posture Paul uses when he says he was educated at the feet of Gamaliel. To sit at a rabbi's feet was to declare yourself his student, to receive his teaching, to be formed by his words. Mary has taken the posture of a disciple. Martha is distracted by all the preparations. She comes to Jesus and says, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." This is a remarkable thing to say. She is not speaking to Mary. She is speaking to the guest, asking him to adjudicate the domestic dispute. She is frustrated, and she is right in a practical sense. There is work to be done, and only one of them is doing it. She is also presenting Jesus with a social test. Will you honor the work I am doing for you, or will you honor the choice my sister has made? Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her." He does not condemn Martha's service. He says she is worried and upset. He names the internal state, not just the external behavior. He says the one thing needed, or the few things, the text has a variant reading, says is what Mary is doing, which is being present to him, listening to him, being with him at the table, not just preparing the table. Pay attention to this. The meal at Mary and Martha's house teaches something about meals that runs through every meal in this story. The table is not primarily about the food, it is about the presence of the person at the center of the table. Martha is preparing the table for Jesus. Mary is receiving Jesus. Both are necessary in the ordinary order of things, but when Jesus himself is present, the preparation can wait. The one thing needed is to be with the one who is there. Now watch what happens when Jesus passes through Jericho. We followed Zacchaeus in episode 6 of season 1, the chief tax collector in the tree, the DEI, the divine necessity language, the dinner we never see but whose fruit we know. But let me stay with the meal itself for a moment, or rather, with the absence of it. The text tells us that Jesus looks up in the tree and says, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." And Zacchaeus comes down and welcomes him gladly, and the crowd grumbles, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. And then Zacchaeus makes his announcement, "Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus says, "Today salvation has come to this house." The meal at Zacchaeus' house is the meal we never see. We do not know what Jesus said at his table. We do not know how long they ate, what food was served, what conversations happened in the room while the crowd grumbled outside. We only know what Zacchaeus said when the meal was over. Or perhaps at the meal, in response to something Jesus said or did that the text does not record. This is one of the most interesting silences in the Gospel of Luke. The meal is the pivot of the entire story. Everything before it is the approach to the table. Everything after it is the result of what happened there. And what happened there is not recorded. We have the before and after. We do not have the during. What we know is this. A man who had spent his career extracting money from his neighbors sat at a table with Jesus, and when he stood up from that table, he had decided to give half his wealth to the poor and repay 4 times anyone he had cheated. Something happened at that table. The text trusts us to understand that the table itself was enough of an explanation, and then the meal that is the center of everything. Luke chapter 22. Jesus and his apostles recline at the table. It is the Passover, the annual commemoration of the Exodus, the meal of liberation, the night when Israel remembers being brought out of slavery and into freedom. And Jesus says something at the beginning of this meal that is unlike anything he has said at any other. "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." In the Greek, epithumia epithumesa, with desire I have desired, this is a Hebraic intensification using both the noun and the verb of the same root, the most emphatic way to express a longing in the Greek language. He has longed with everything in him to eat this specific meal with these specific people at this specific moment. The most explicitly emotional statement Jesus makes about a meal. He wants to be here. He wants to be with them. He is not approaching the Last Supper with resignation or solemnity alone. He is approaching it with desire. And then he says, "For I tell you, I will not eat it again until it finds fulfillment in the kingdom of God." This is the open loop partially resolved. He's at the table and already looking past the table. He will not eat the Passover again, not this Passover, not the full Passover, until the kingdom comes in its fullness. The meal he has longed for most deeply is the meal he is eating for the last time. He is present and already gone, at the table and already beyond it. He takes bread. He gives thanks. He breaks it. He He gives it to them and says, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He takes the cup and says, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." The four verbs are there. Takes, gives thanks, breaks, gives. The same four verbs from the feeding of the 5,000. The same four verbs that the disciples on the road to Emmaus will recognize in a stranger's hands. The same four verbs that the early church will use to describe what they do when they gather. And then he adds, "Do this in remembrance of me." Here's what most people miss about the command to remember. In the Hebrew tradition, remembrance is not merely mental recollection. To remember in the Hebraic sense is to make present again, to reenact the reality so that it is not merely recalled but experienced. When Israel remembers the Exodus at Passover, they are not simply recalling a historical event, they are participating in it. The bread and the cup are not symbols of a past event. They are the present participation in what Jesus is about to do, his body given, his blood poured out, the new covenant enacted in the breaking of bread and the sharing of wine. He is at this table. He is not eating the Passover again until the kingdom comes. He is the Passover. The meal is pointing at the one who is sharing it. 3 days after the Last Supper, 2 disciples are walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus. We followed them in episode 6 of season 1, and again in the finale of season 1. But I want to return to the meal, specifically to the moment of recognition, because it is the most theologically precise thing in the entire Emmaus story. They have walked 7 miles with Jesus. They have not recognized him. Luke says their eyes were kept from recognizing him. They have told him about the events of the past 3 days, the crucifixion, the empty tomb, the women's report, and he has walked with them and explained the scriptures to them, beginning with Moses and all the prophets. He interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. Their hearts were burning within them as he spoke. They reach Emmaus. He acts as if he is going further. They urge him to stay. It is nearly evening. The day is almost over. He goes in to stay with them. He reclines at table with them. He takes the bread. He gives thanks. He breaks it. He gives it to them, and their eyes are opened and they recognize him. Not in the 7 miles of walking, not in the explanation of Scripture as comprehensive as it was, not in the conversation, the warmth of it, the burning of their hearts, in the breaking of the bread, in the specific physical embodied act of a meal shared, in the taking and the giving thanks and the breaking and the giving. Their eyes are opened and they know who he is, and he vanishes. They sit in Emmaus for the length of time it takes to say, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road, while he opened the scriptures to us?" And then they get up and go back to Jerusalem, 7 miles, in the dark, because they have seen something at a table that cannot be contained in the village they arrived in. The recognition of the risen Christ happens in the breaking of bread, not in a vision, not in a theological argument, in a meal, in the 4 verbs. This is who he is, the one who takes, who gives thanks, who breaks, who gives. The disciples know him in the act of the table, because that is where he has always been most fully himself. And then the beach. John chapter 21. The disciples have gone back to fishing, back to the thing they were doing before all of this began. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, James and John, and 2 others. They fish all night and catch nothing. At dawn, a figure on the shore calls out, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answer. "Cast the net on the right side of the boat," the figure says. They cast it. The net fills. They cannot haul it in. John says to Peter, "It is the Lord." And Peter puts on his outer garment. He had taken it off to work, and jumps into the water and swims to shore. The others come in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. They come ashore, and there is a charcoal fire there with fish on it, and some bread. Jesus says, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." Peter drags the net ashore. 153 large fish, John specifies, with that specificity of an eyewitness who counted them. And the net is not torn. Jesus says, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dare ask him, "Who are you?" because they know it is the Lord. John says this is now the 3rd time Jesus has appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead, and he has appeared with a charcoal fire and fish and bread and the most ordinary words, "Come and have breakfast." Not, "Let us discuss the implications of the resurrection." Not, "Here is your mission." Not, "Let me address your abandonment of me at the cross, your 3 denials, your return to fishing as if the last 3 years did not happen." Come and have breakfast. Jesus comes and takes the bread and gives it to them, and does the same with the fish. The 4 verbs are present even here: takes, gives. The same action that turned water into wine at Cana, that fed 5,000 on a hillside, that was given to 12 in an upper room, that opened the eyes of 2 people in Emmaus. The same action on a beach for 7 disciples making an ordinary morning meal. Pay attention to this detail. The fire is a charcoal fire. The Greek is anthrakia, a charcoal fire, a bed of burning coals. The only other place in John's Gospel where this specific word appears is in John chapter 18, where Peter is standing by a charcoal fire in the courtyard of the high priest, warming himself when he denies Jesus 3 times. The same type of fire. The specific detail that John preserves, not just a fire, but a charcoal fire, creates an explicit echo. Peter denied Jesus by a charcoal fire. Jesus makes breakfast by a charcoal fire. And at this breakfast, Jesus will ask Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Once for each denial. The breakfast is the restoration. The charcoal fire of shame becomes the charcoal fire of grace. The risen Christ makes breakfast for the people who ran. He does not require an explanation or a confession or a theology of their failure. He requires only that they come and eat. He has been waiting on the beach for them. He made the fire himself. He cooked the fish himself. Come and have breakfast. That is the whole invitation. Come and eat. Come to the table. You belong here, even now, especially now. 2,000 years later, the invitation stands. In churches on every continent, in languages Galilean fishermen could not have imagined, in the breaking of bread and the sharing of the cup. The same 4 verbs, the same action, the same declaration. You belong at this table. Come and have breakfast. The risen Christ is still the host. And there is a meal coming. Revelation chapter 19, verse 9. Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. Every meal in this series, the best wine last at Cana, the sinners and tax collectors at Levi's, the alabaster jar and the forgiven debt at Simon's, the 12 baskets of leftovers on the hillside, the bread broken in the upper room, the eyes opened at Emmaus, the breakfast on the beach. Every one of them was a foretaste, a rehearsal, an appetizer for the meal that is coming, the meal that is not yet and is guaranteed by the first fruits of the resurrection, the wedding supper of the Lamb, to which everyone who has come to the table of Jesus has been invited. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in the prison cell at Tegel, wrote about the table as the place where the community of Christ becomes visible, the table where the boundaries that divided the world outside are suspended for the duration of the meal, where what you are does not determine whether you belong, where the only qualification is the invitation. He was writing theology from a cell, but he was also writing from the memory of tables, the family table, the seminary table, the clandestine communion table of the confessing church meeting in secret. The table, he wrote, is where the community eats together, and in doing so declares, we belong to each other because we belong to Christ. The meals of Jesus are the tables Bonhoeffer was writing about, the sinner with the alabaster jar, and the Pharisee with the credentials, and the tax collector with the feast, and the woman choosing the better part, and the chief tax collector announcing restitution, and the disciples pulling in the full net. All of them belong at the same table, because the host has invited them. From Cana to the beach, from the first sign to the last breakfast, from the best wine arriving when the wine has run out to the fish cooking on a charcoal fire for the people who ran. Here is what I want to leave you with. First, in the first century Jewish world, the table was the most loaded social and spiritual space available. Who you ate with was a declaration about whose company you kept before God. The Dead Sea Scrolls community ate only with the ritually pure. The Pharisees ate only within the bounds of the clean. The table was the place where the categories of belonging were most visibly enacted. And Jesus sat at the table of a tax collector surrounded by tax collectors. At the table of a Pharisee who failed to honor him, in a house in Jericho that the whole city considered the residence of a sinner, at a supper with 12 men who would betray or deny or abandon him before the night was over, on a beach with 7 men who had gone back to fishing as if the resurrection had not happened. Every table he sat at was a declaration. This person belongs in the presence of God, not eventually, not after they have sorted themselves out, now, at this table, today. Second, the 4 actions Jesus performs at every significant meal are always the same. He takes, he gives thanks, he breaks, he distributes. At the feeding of the 5,000, at the Last Supper, at Emmaus, at the beach, the same 4 verbs repeated across the gospel narratives as if they are a signature, the signature of a particular way of being at a table. And the action is always about the same thing, receiving what is given, being grateful for it, allowing it to be broken. and trusting that the breaking is what allows the distribution. The bread that is taken whole cannot be given to 5,000 people. It has to be broken first. The body that is given in the upper room has to be broken before it can be shared. The recognition at Emmaus comes not in the explanation, but in the breaking. The four verbs are always moving toward the break, and the break is always moving toward the distribution. Third, and this is the one I want to stay with you, the last meal Jesus cooks is breakfast on a beach for the people who ran, not a formal Passover with liturgy and lamb, not a banquet with the best wine, the ordinary morning meal, fish on a charcoal fire, bread waiting. He made it himself, and he says, "Come and have breakfast." Nobody asks who he is, because they know it is the Lord. The one who said, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you," is still eagerly desiring to eat with the people he loves, even after everything, especially after everything. The resurrection does not change his desire for the table, it confirms it. He has risen and he is cooking breakfast, and the invitation is the same as it has always been. Come and eat. You belong here. Come and have breakfast. Which meal of Jesus hits you hardest? The dinner at Simon the Pharisee's house, the Last Supper, or breakfast on the beach? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. The last thing the risen Christ does before the Great Commission is make breakfast for the people who abandoned him. Come and have breakfast. That is still the invitation. It has not been withdrawn. The fire is still burning. The bread is still there. Come.